I encourage everyone to move close to the stage so you can see the exhibit of summaries, visual summaries. All right, everyone, come closer so you can see closer and then have a seat. Our first rapporteur will have to leave shortly, so there's a narrowing window of time. So yeah, we need to stick within the range of these, yeah? Don't hesitate. Do come closer. Maybe we just get started now. So, welcome one last time into this plenary hall after 2.5-ish very intense, very hot days. It's now we get to really reap the fruit of all these discussions. We get to see the pictures, plural. And I won't say all that much and simply hand over the mic to Dominic, who will share a recap of the Co-Creation Lab discussions focused on research funders and ethics evaluators, challenges and possible ways to overcome them.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I will try to just stick to very high-level points here. We had two very intense, wide-ranging discussions in our sessions, and it's definitely not possible to go into the nuances here. But just to give you a bit of a sense of what we discussed. So we were looking at principles and guidelines from a funder perspective and a research evaluator perspective in particular. Just some kind of high-level thoughts here. So there was a lot of agreement on good scientific practice, what would constitute that, and not that much disagreement and discussion about that, surprisingly. Also for fairness, there was a lot of agreement on fairness in both sessions. Some more specific points in relation to fairness did come up, though. For example, how to do an intergenerational assessment, how to think about maybe ecosystem health, planetary health, population health as part of that. The nexus connecting legitimacy and fairness, inclusion of stakeholders, the rights of indigenous groups, for example, other rights holders to shape research decision-making came up, and there were quite a number of points about where that would be appropriate at the beginning versus other stages down the line, but there's a lot of support for earliest possible involvement there. In terms of proportionality, there were quite a lot of discussions about what that should mean. So proportionality of governance, of questions of scale, for example, proportion of funding going to SRM as opposed to other things, and questions about moral hazard related to that as well. So proportionality was quite a diverse discussion. It actually broke up into several different themes in the end. Research prioritization also came up in relation to that. Policy alignment. There was a lot of discussion in both sessions about what that is supposed to mean and what maybe it should mean. And one of the interesting points that came up there was that you have different national positions on SRM policy and regional kind of positions, but also quite significant disagreements or lack of policy commitment from other actors. So what does policy alignment mean, or what should it mean when you have, it's not as if countries all have the same stance on SRM, or maybe the same agenda in relation to it. So the question would be whom to align with if we want policy-aligned research. This is a strategic question that needs thought. That connected to discussions about philanthropic funders as well, whether they could be aligned with public funders, when they are not, what to do about it, how to regulate that space. There was also a discussion about whether not funding research incentivized illegitimate actors to do it, and on the other hand, a kind of not playing that game response, that would be akin to thinking along the lines of an arms race. So no agreement on that point, but just to surface, these were some important things that came up. Precaution. So there was a lot of agreement about precaution, the precautionary principle as a guide for setting boundaries on what can be done, and obviously following the legal position here, but also highlighting the possibility for harm in this space. But then an interesting follow-up to that would be how harm is defined can be something that is determined by affected communities themselves, in particular if it's research in indigenous territories. So rather than saying, here's what counts as harm, and imposing that on an assessment of research. So quite wide-ranging. There was also a kind of last point, very big picture question about enforcement or enforceability across all of these levels. So without that, it seems quite pointless to have a list of principles, but if you do then institute legal regimes or governance regimes with these principles, with enforcement capabilities, where does that happen? Which actors are doing it? What are the consequences of breaking compliance, and so on? So these are, of course, important points that we just touched on, but more is to be said. So I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Thanks, Dominic. I'll give you a brief recap. I'll give you a brief recap of the session that we had here downstairs for regulators and civil society representatives starting in the morning, and then obviously the mixed group in the afternoon. Like Dominic said, there's no chance that I'm going to be able to fully reflect all the points and all the nuances from that discussion. And I think what I will say is one of the key takeaways that for me anyway, personally, I would say that it was quite a challenging conversation actually, and quite difficult to sort of get to think about these principles and guidance, and what do we actually even mean by that, or what are these big themes, and do we even agree with that approach as a starting point almost. So I think, we then started diving into, what does this mean for research governance specifically from your perspective as regulator or as civil society representative. So starting with these big themes of proportionality, legitimacy, what do they actually mean? What do they make you start think of, and things like that. So that it was quite a challenge to unpack that. So I think, starting from that, from your own understanding of these principles was how we started the conversation. And I think I also sensed a sort of almost a frustration or a realization perhaps that there's a sense of urgency to move forward with the debate, whereas at the same time there is the people are feeling like we're having the same conversation over and over again. So I feel like there was a bit of a tension in that regard as well. But yeah, diving into some of the discussion a little bit more. We talked about good scientific practice and how there's also overlap between good scientific practice and policy alignment, different views. Also thinking about the direct impacts of research, obviously, but also the more indirect impacts of research and what the impact of research programs, etc. And that's where the role for regulators obviously becomes relevant as well. We talked about fairness. Another word that was coined is justice. So is it better to call it justice? And what do these different terms mean in different contexts and to different people was something that we touched upon as well. Let me see, we talked about proportionality. Yeah, also overlaps with justice, for example. Ambiguity and uncertainty was mentioned. How do we advance the field, and to what end, I suppose, is a question that was raised. Furthermore, legitimacy, and also an acknowledgement that legitimacy is closely tied to fairness. So there's that overlap between those. And then a discussion about precaution, what that means, perhaps in a legal sense, in an ethical sense. Also, precaution being precaution or precautionary principle, precautionary approach, all those different terminologies within that bucket, essentially. We then went through all of those principles as a group and tried to sort of synthesize some of the responses into themes within those overarching themes, I guess, or principles, as you'd want to call it. And then in the afternoon, we had the mixed group, and we went through like what is missing from your perspective. And I think we had some very valuable contributions from different people there. And some people, yeah, putting up the green stickers, the red stickers, what they support, what they disagree with. And just to give you an example, we had a bit of a discussion about the CBD decision as a way of operationalizing precaution, for example. But we also talked about free, prior, and informed consent as something that was missing, so that was added. I think it was under a couple of principles that was added as well. So we talked then a little bit about what does that actually mean if you come to operationalizing that in a research context. So is it the role of research teams themselves to do that extensive consultation, or is that perhaps at a higher, more program level, and how does that work for research experiments that don't have a direct environmental impact, but if it was scaled up, or or space-based research, for example, how do you consult with affected communities? Who are the affected communities? So we had a bit of a discussion about how to operationalize that as a principle or as a guideline within different research contexts. Yeah, and then we talked a little bit about democratic control as well, and what these different principles mean to different countries as well, and how that what the meaning is in different contexts as well, so that there's not necessarily any consensus in that regard either. And I think I'll stop there, and yeah, thanks all for your contributions.
Thanks, Julie. And last but not least, the researchers, actually they were first here, and so we come full circle. The conversation in the researchers group, in particular in the first phase, was really surfacing a recognition that researchers are often the recipients of normative expectations, of guidelines, of ethical frameworks, and these come in different forms and shapes and sizes and levels of scrutiny, and they impose a lot of burden onto the researching community. That was one of the main recognitions and challenges that was stated. And linked to that was the observation that there's a need for structures and infrastructures that actually meet those challenges and expectations so that the research community can actually deliver on them in a appropriate manner. And this, I'll just give a few examples, includes time that's needed to engage with communities where that's expected and needed, and that is a lot of time in many cases, especially if a research project is not anchored deeply already in an existing landscape of actors, but also other types of capacity challenges, such as challenges in identifying relevant regulations when we think of a group that doesn't necessarily include a legal scholar. That's a question of research design, which in some cases also traces back to the structure in which the research grant has been offered or is available. Similar challenges in knowing about existing guidelines for engagement or participation. An example was given for a very detailed guidance provided by a South African indigenous peoples community with apparent support from the UN. And if one doesn't know about this, and it may not be quite so straightforward to find these nuggets of really detailed, really helpful in guidance, then of course that is a barrier to actually meeting that expectation. So of course that's emphasizing a lot of wishes and asks for support, but I think it's important to recognize that there is among many, there is great goodwill in actually meeting those expectations, and that perhaps one of the structural steps could include figuring out what needs to be done so that the capacities are in place. Similar, actually, when it comes to communication challenges, and I speak here both to communication between disciplines as a precursor to collaboration between disciplines, which is something that is notoriously hard, and even more so, communication between academia and non-academia, with publics of various kinds, policy. That is a type of communication which is also very hard, and perhaps particularly hard for very technical fields. And that all speaks to another question which was posed quite strongly, and I think also resonates with previous discussions, as to the role of public and private funding going into research here, where public funders might be uniquely placed to take very deliberate steps to address these structural challenges, and by design might hold processes that lend legitimacy, not just for the sake of it, but by design. And that also is quite something important to address, and that includes the process of setting topical priorities, which go back to a knowledge demand that stems from the world of policy, where policy does get to set the direction, the topical questions that this research agenda needs to be co-designed, was one phrase that was used between the worlds of policy and academia, and that again might lend support to the legitimacy of the knowledge, if one can call it that. And so, yeah, and there was the residual question mark as to all that, how all that applies to private actors, and perhaps in particular those that are pursuing for-profit interests, where I think the contrast is quite stark, and where the implication is that perhaps to influence the for-profit world, other means are needed, and that's a challenge that may be best addressed not by the researchers, but by the realm of regulators and others. So, although there may also be responsibility on the researchers to take very deliberate choices in where they spend their time. That's my quick recap from the researchers session. And with that, I would like to invite Sylvia onto the stage as well.
Thanks, Matthias. Okay. So just to point out, I'm the one with the mic, but Chris and Norma, who are at the back, and Peter Yarn, who was here yesterday, this was teamwork. So this is not just all me. Whatever I'm going to talk about is basically our collective reflection. I'm going to keep it super brief because, yeah, it was spoken a lot. And I want to think of it in terms of like, what were the patterns that resurfaced for us throughout the 2 days? And it's helpful for me to think about, it's like, what actually did I draw the most in the last 2 days? And the three of us agreed it was eyes. So eyes that speak to transparency, eyes that, but it's the distinction, transparency was sort of the big word that came out. But then with that comes a bit of a tension between transparency and legitimacy. So just because something's transparent doesn't mean it's valid. So that was a really big theme. Then people was another one. So you're going to see a lot of people with question marks. So who's taking over this? So it sounds like there is, you're a group of people in a field that you're really good at what you do, and you're sort of trying to organize yourselves into how to do this. And there is a big sense of urgency. This was really palpable in the rooms. Because, yeah, we're running out of time and we need to do it quickly. It seems like the thing that came out today, actually, for me, the most was the definitions. So there was a lot of words being repeated, like trust, transparency, cooperation. So I think all of these, you kind of agree, these are the big themes, but then how do you define them and how do you have the detail around them? Yeah, what was cool about the interactive board actually is that I saw you engaging with each other. So that's really nice to see. So for example, here you have like somebody wrote inclusive public engagement, and this kind of reflects on what I'm saying about definitions as well. Yeah, you need inclusive public engagement, and then somebody else kind of made it more specific, and you need to engagement across people, countries, and knowledges. So that kind of points towards that. So yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to be part of this, and I wish you a very cool afternoon.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I do want to really congratulate you and your team. I have heard many, many very positive remarks about the work that you have done. So really, really from the bottom of my heart, congratulations and thank you for supporting this conversation so beautifully. With that, there's not that much more to be said. I will, first of all, want to really, really thank and congratulate the organizing team. There are too many to be called out individually, but really I was so impressed how everyone came together and how things that were at risk of falling apart were just picked up on and proactively solved in a way that allowed this conference to, at least for me, feel quite smooth. And I think that means something that's not easy to do. And so both on the side of climate strategies, my colleagues at Perspectives, and all the other consortium partners, thank you for the roles that you've played. This has been a team effort, and it's a continuing effort, obviously. So the project, as you know, runs until December of this year. As I said a couple of times, there are some forthcoming publications, some that have been in the pipeline for a while. Granted, they have been held back a little bit, in part by the fact that this forum has been an effort to organize, so has taken a lot of time. But you can expect quite a few of the analytical publications coming forward before the summer break. I feel fairly confident making that statement. And a few more that will come after the summer break and hopefully before year end, including the much discussed publications that will explore guidelines and principles as per today's discussions as well. They will very much draw from these discussions. I've seen a lot of resonance with what our thinking has been already, and so that was very encouraging to see. Also, you can expect some policy briefs and all that good stuff. So I'm not going to bore you with the details. There's one thing that I would encourage you, and if you haven't done it yet, and that's to sign up for the stakeholder forum, which you can find on the webpage, I believe under newsletter. You can scroll down and sign up there. This will give you access to the latest news. You will be informed on new publications, including, and this might be interesting, first, we will be sharing rather quickly, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but rather quickly, these visuals, slides, and other relevant materials from the conference. And followed after that will be a more detailed conference report that will outline the course of the conversations in text form as well. So stay tuned for that. And there's probably a lot of things that I'm still missing now that I may need to say. I'm looking at a few colleagues. François, please.
Well, I'll just say thank you to everyone for these very constructive discussions. Also wanted to thank our funders, obviously the European Commission, UKRI, Navigation Fund, the Degrees Initiative also that really helped not only bringing more voices to this conversation, but also helping making this event happen today. So we've been seeing many people running around and helping, and yes, thank you so much. I think that's all I wanted to add. So if you want to have a final word, Matthias, otherwise I'll take it.
Enjoy the freedom of leaving this hall and having a breath of fresh air, I think. Thank you. And thank everyone here for the spirit of co-creation. Thank you.